I was too stunned to ask anything at the end of that meeting. My head was swirling. I didn't quite understand what had happened. A letter was read out from Letby by one of the senior nurses in a quite emotional tone. And then we were told how much we'd upset Letby by the chief executive, and told firmly that the board had accepted the findings, that there had been no evidence of any wrongdoing, and that Letby was exonerated. I do deeply regret, and I'm ashamed, that I failed to protect the babies from harm by Letby, but I do understand that the parents concerned probably now would prefer explanations rather than belated apologies.
Those were the words of paediatrician John Gibbs as he began giving his evidence. Now, he's one of a number of doctors who worked on the ward alongside Lucy Letby, and over the next few weeks we'll hear from many of them. The reason for his apology at the beginning of that evidence was because even though he and others did raise concerns about what was happening on the ward, he accepted they didn't call the police soon enough.
He was shown a statement Ruth Millwood has provided to the inquiry. At the time, she was the hospital's head of risk and safety, and in it she said the hospital should have reported the cluster of deaths in June 2015 as a serious incident, and then this would have triggered a formal investigation. But it's fair to say Dr. Gibbs was perplexed by this. He said that as far as he was concerned, it was reported and it was investigated, and Alison Kelly, the then Director of Nursing, was involved in that review.
I don't understand what Mrs. Millwood means by it would have been appropriate for the hospital to report the increase in deaths as a serious incident. I thought they were. I thought there was a serious incident review of the first 3 deaths. I thought it had happened. Now, whether it had been reported to the right channel and gone to the right committee and been reported from the hospital to someone outside the hospital, I don't understand that part of the working of clinical risk management. I thought these deaths were reported as a serious incident, and I thought they were reviewed, including the Director of Nursing being involved in that review.
Then, in early July, Dr. Stephen Breary, who was the lead consultant on the neonatal unit, organised a meeting of the consultants, and this was the first time that it was noted that Lucy Letby had been present and involved in the resuscitation of all 4 babies. But at that stage, nobody suspected her. In fact, they simply felt sorry for her.
In fact, felt sympathy for Letby at that time, because we felt she had been unlucky to have been involved in a number of incidents. It can happen to any of us, and it's happened to me during my career, that you have a bad run where when you're on call or on duty, in a short space of time, a number of unfortunate incidents, cot deaths and other deaths may happen. But then that stops happening if it's just an unfortunate coincidence. A few weeks earlier, over consecutive nights, Child I had had serious collapses and consultants had been called in each time. So a little like Child G, I had gained the impression that Child I was quite a vulnerable, had been a very premature baby and was prone to these collapses. I didn't realise then that the earlier collapses have now been attributed to harm by Letby. So I thought this was a baby who was quite precarious.
Dr. Gibbs went on to say that it was after the death of baby I that he began to feel more worried, especially when he looked back at what had happened to baby C. And he said it was towards the end of 2015 and early into 2016 when he began to feel that something unusual, not natural, might be happening on the unit. He said the only common factor he and his colleagues could see was Lucy Letby, but he said her association with the collapses and deaths at this point didn't necessarily mean she was harming them deliberately. He said Lucy Letby often took extra shifts, which might explain why she was present when many of the babies were collapsing and dying. And, he said, he was wary of making accusations.
I was aware of what had happened at Stepping Hill Hospital, and I was aware not only that patients had been harmed and some killed with insulin, that the wrong nurse was accused because she happened to be on duty every time, and someone else had done it but managed to conceal their activities and so on. And so when thinking about might Letby have done it, I was also aware that Letby might be completely innocent and it was just a coincidence, as it was at Stepping Hill for the nurse that was falsely accused.
By November and early December, another baby J, suffered a series of collapses but survived. And around the same time, Dr. Breary had also asked a neonatologist from another hospital to review all the deaths on the unit in 2015.
The review confirmed the consultant's suspicions that a number of deaths on the unit had been unexpected, although there was a medical explanation given for most, but not all the baby's deaths. It also highlighted that many of the collapses happened between midnight and 4 a.m. during the night shift. And not long after this, a decision was taken to move Lucy Letby onto day shifts. But this again was something Dr. Gibbs said he was not immediately made aware of.
By April 2016, he said his suspicions began to coalesce. By then, Lucy Letby had tried to kill baby K and also attacked the twin boys, baby L and M. Baby K died at Arrow Park Hospital after she was transferred. The twins survived. Again, Dr. Gibbs admitted this was another collective failure of doctors not to spot high insulin levels in the blood tests of baby L, whose glucose drip was poisoned by Lucy Letby.
He told the inquiry that by this stage in 2016, the atmosphere on the unit was becoming more difficult. There was obvious tension, he said, between the consultants and the senior nurses. Dr. Gibbs said there was pushback from Lucy Letby's manager, Arian Powell, who said the consultant's suspicions about her were totally wrong.
There was a very strong argument being put forward from the senior nurse on the unit that this suspicion was totally wrong and that we were maligning Nurse Letby and that she was a very competent, safe nurse. I knew from Dr. Breary that there was a very firm pushback from the senior nursing level that this was utterly wrong and we were being unfair on Nurse Letby.
So he was asked about these suspicions, and it was suggested that if they were right, then Lucy Letby posed a serious danger and immediate action should have been taken.
Yes, it should have done. But perhaps I was, and maybe we were, but my colleagues have to answer for themselves, the other paediatricians, influenced by the conviction that we were wrong from the nursing side. And I regret that we or I didn't go to the police at this time after the thematic review.
He said the fact that no one had seen Lucy Letby causing harm, combined with the fact that the post-mortems carried out on the babies had failed to uncover any foul play, also stopped them from calling police.
There's no one on the unit throughout that time seemed to have seen anyone harm a patient, and also the post-mortems that had been done didn't seem to reveal any harm having been caused to patients. And so all of those contributed to me, and maybe my colleagues, but they'll have to let you know, contributed to me dithering at that time, which is why I said at the beginning, I am ashamed for not having protected babies from harm.
He told the hearing it was his understanding that in early May 2016, Dr. Breary told the medical director, Ian Harvey, and the director of nursing, Alison Kelly, directly about their suspicions that Lucy Letby was deliberately harming babies. But he accepted that when this led to no action being taken, the consultant should have called the police.
He fed back to us that no decision had been made, but the senior managers were considering the problem and hopefully we'd come to a decision. That could have been a trigger, should have been a trigger, that we bypassed the managers and went to the police. And we failed to do that.
On June the 27th, 3 days after baby P's death, they met to discuss their concerns about Lucy Letby. And Dr. Breary telephoned the medical director, Mr. Harvey, straight afterwards, and later followed it up with an email demanding that she be removed from the ward for patient safety reasons. But their request was refused, and Lucy Letby continued to work on the unit for 3 more shifts until she went on holiday on July the 1st.
The day before, on June the 30th, Dr. J. Ram circulated a medical journal to his consultant colleagues via email. The journal, which we also heard about during the trial, discussed the dangers of air embolus. That's the injection of air into the bloodstream. And that's when Dr. Gibbs said the penny dropped.
It's a devious and subtle way of trying to harm patients, which tends to leave nothing behind afterwards for a post-mortem to find.
With Lucy Letby then on holiday for a fortnight, the senior managers promised the consultants that a rapid internal investigation would take place. One of them, Dr. Murthy Saladi, told the inquiry that he thought the managers would get the doctors and nurses together to share information and try to get to the bottom of what was going on. But that didn't happen, and he said he felt they'd already made up their minds that she couldn't be responsible.
Instead, the managers told them this was a doctors versus nurses problem and they needed an independent body, such as the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health, to look into the unit and the deaths.
The consultants made it clear to the managers that they didn't want Lucy Letby back on the unit after her holiday unless CCTV was installed and she was supervised by another nurse at all times. Dr. Gibbs said the consultants knew this would be difficult to put into practice and suggested it was a deliberate tactic to block her return. In fact, we know now that it worked because soon afterwards she was moved into an admin role at the hospital and never worked on the unit again.
We did find out, though, that even after she was moved, she still had the support of some of the nurses, and the following December, she was invited to the ward Christmas party, which she attended. So Dr. Gibbs said he and his consultant colleagues were stunned when, at an emotional meeting in January 2017 with the senior managers, they were told the reviews had uncovered poor leadership and poor communication on the unit, but crucially, no wrongdoing by Lucy Letby. Dr. Gibbs pointed out that the consultants hadn't seen either of the reports or had a satisfactory explanation for why the deaths and collapses had occurred. Despite this, the Chief Executive, Tony Chambers, told them in no uncertain terms that the hospital board had already accepted the review's findings and a line was being drawn under the affair. And Dr. Saladi told the hearing that Mr. Chambers was red-faced and angry at this meeting, and he even banged his fist on the table to get the point over to the consultants that this was the end of it. Then he told them they'd upset Lucy Letby, and they were ordered to apologise to her.
I was too stunned to ask anything at the end of that meeting. My head was swirling. I didn't quite understand what had happened. But it was clear that was the end of it. The board had accepted these reports, had shown no wrongdoing, and we were to apologise to Letby. We paediatricians couldn't understand the increase. Interestingly, the board could, and we wanted to know their reasons for accepting why there'd been an increase.
When they finally saw the reviews, Dr. Gibbs and the other consultants realised that deliberate harm had not been discounted. So, on February the 28th, all 7 consultants did write that letter of apology to Lucy Letby, but they were careful to make sure they didn't accept that she'd done nothing wrong. In the letter they wrote, "Dear Lucy, the increased mortality on the neonatal unit and subsequent reviews and redesignation of the neonatal unit has been a very stressful time for all staff and parents. We understand that it has been an exceptionally stressful time for you. We would like to apologise for any inappropriate comments that may have been made during this difficult period. As you will be aware, emotions have run high. We are very sorry for the stress and upset that you have experienced in the last year. Please be reassured that patient safety has been our absolute priority during this difficult time."
By this stage, Dr. Gibbs said all trust had broken down with the hospital's senior managers, and contrary to their demands, they resolved not to draw a line under the matter. In fact, they wrote to Mr. Chambers demanding that he ask the coroner to undertake a full investigation into the deaths and unexpected collapses as a matter of urgency. In the letter, they said that the reports from the Royal College and Dr. Horden had not reassured them that all the deaths and collapses were explicable by natural causes.
Dr. Gibbs said he believed their letter was passed on to the coroner, but they quickly realised it would be too slow, and the only agency that could properly investigate was the police. So on April the 12th, they met a barrister instructed by the hospital who they thought was going to help them present what had happened to officers. In fact, when he arrived, he said he was there to help them decide if there was enough reason to go to the police.
We made it very clear to him at the beginning of the meeting. It doesn't quite come across in his notes, which are otherwise a very good summary of the meeting, very clear that we felt he'd been misled and we'd been misled. And he apologised for that.
Dr. Saladi said he felt that the barrister was the first person, including any of the hospital managers, to properly listen to the consultant's side of the story. It was the barrister, in fact, who suggested the consultants meet with the senior police officer who sat on the local child death overview panel. And we now know that as a result of that meeting, the police investigation, Operation Hummingbird, was launched.